it's time to clarify exactly what the intelligence attribute means, and in the process, I may just blow your mind. I've spent a month poring over source material, encyclopedia entries, psychology articles, and written 5 versions of what I'm about to lay down on you, refining it to be as concise, useful, and easy to understand as I can. So grab yourself a tasty beverage. We're about to get deeply nerdy. Picture the mind. But don't picture a brain in a jar, that's too clinical. Instead, picture a house of cards, a really elaborate one. At the bottom, we've got a couple of sturdy, bent cards holding the whole thing up. But as you build higher, the structure gets more complex, more fragile, and frankly, a little terrifying. Because we're headed into territory that goes far beyond our current human capacity entirely, and perhaps getting a stark glimpse into our own evolutionary future. Intelligence is one of the most misunderstood numbers on the character sheet. I'd say wisdom is a close second, but that's another video for another day. And we're not just talking about whether you get a +1 to your history check, we're talking about the architecture of thought itself. That's a huge distinction right away, because it's so easy to treat intelligence as just a game mechanic, like having an 18 means you automatically solve the puzzle. But if you actually look at the source material, and I pulled from damn near everything I have, from vintage Dragon magazines, every edition of the game, and stuff like the last century of theories in psychology and neurobiology. It's not just about knowing things. The sources define intelligence as mental might. Because before we start climbing the ladder of cognition, we need to clarify how intelligence is fundamentally different from wisdom, because people mix these two up constantly. Wisdom is your connection to the world, your intuition, your senses, your gut feeling. That's why it governs your perception checks and why it's important to clerics, because they're both constantly looking for subtle signs and portents of the supernatural in the world around them. And their very profession involves being highly sensitive to the motivations and feelings of other people. Intelligence, on the other hand, is the raw processing power, your hard drive speed and your RAM. It governs language, memory capacity, and the ability to synthesize information. So yes, you can be incredibly smart and have absolutely zero common sense. You can learn in a book what to do in common situations, but if you don't see that you're in one of those situations when it happens, that knowledge is useless to you, right? So that's the classic absent-minded professor archetype explained. Done. Moving on. My mission in this video is to construct the entire ladder of cognition, starting from the absolute bottom, the mindless ooze, and climbing up through the animals, past the average human, through the geniuses, and finally ascending to the terrifying levels of superintelligence found in gods and old ones. Unlike every damn lore book I've found, I'm not going to sweep those levels under the rug of mystery. I'm going to explain to you how they actually work, and in doing so, you will understand how gods think. It's a journey from the basement of the mind to the architects of reality itself, and honestly, the basement is kind of where the horror movie starts. So let's go there. Intelligence 1. The basement. At Intelligence 1, you have to understand that there really is no brain in the way we think of it. This is the stimulus response machine. We're talking slimes, oozes, shrieking fungi, or that classic role-playing trap, the rug of smothering, the rug that just wraps you up and doesn't let you go. You can wedge some constructs and simple undead in here as well, and as long as they have some tiny degree of autonomy, not just programmed to follow the exact letter of one command. And here's the scary part. If I stab the ooze, does it know I'm hurting it? Also, older sources, such as Van Richten's Guide, tell us that for every couple of centuries that an undead has been mindless, it gains intelligence points. So a zombie can actually rise to the level of sapiens. The source material is very specific. At Intelligence 1, there is no self. There's no concept of I am hurting. There's only biological or magical imperatives. Hunger, constriction, sensation. It reacts, but it doesn't know it's reacting, and this leads to a complete lack of object permanence. If you're fighting an ooze, and you manage to hide behind a pillar so it can't sense you, you cease to exist for it instantly. The pain you caused it a second ago is forgotten. It's a terrifying state of being because you can't reason with it. You can't threaten it. It can't learn. It just happens. It's like fighting a lawnmower. Okay, let's step up a rung. Intelligence 2 and 3. Now we're getting into actual animals. This is where we see the shift to associative memory. The classic example of text used for Intelligence 2 is a trained horse. Horses are smart. They know when you have an apple. They know when you're holding the saddle. But we have to be careful not to anthropomorphize them. They learn through repetition, pain, or reward. They can categorize a smell as good or bad, or a person as a feeder or a threat, but they don't know why. The horse knows the saddle means work on its back, but it doesn't understand the concept of a journey or transportation. It's associative, not logical. Saddle equals weight on back, not saddle means we're going to the next town. Predators like wolves and lions are smarter than that. That puts them in Intelligence 3. The key phase to remember is routine dominant patterns. A wolf can execute a simple sequence. It stalks, it waits, it strikes. It can patrol a territory. It looks like a plan, but it's actually a routine. The limitation is that if the routine is disrupted by something totally novel, they fail. For example, a wolf knows how to herd deer into a canyon. That's a learned pattern. But if the deer suddenly flies into the air, because magic exists in these worlds, the wolf doesn't have the cognitive tools to improvise a new strategy. It creates a logical error in their brain. They're smart within their box, but completely lost outside of it. And that is the massive barrier we cross at Intelligence 4. This is the threshold for the simplest humanoids. And I think of this entry as minimally educated warriors or the habit-driven agent. Think of the stereotypical dumb henchman, the half-ogre guy standing guard who isn't really paying attention, or creatures like the ambush drake. For a drake, it's a wickedly cunning beast, because at Intelligence 4 you get the basics of a social existence, concepts like mine, yours, leader, enemy. But while they understand strongest as leader, they still can't grasp abstract ideas and ideals. If you try to explain justice or freedom to an Intelligence 4 creature, you're wasting your breath. They only learn by hands-on experience. You can't explain a plan. You have to show them or give them the very simple sequence of words they understand. For example, you stand here, hit that guy who comes through the door. If you say, protect the perimeter to ensure the safety of the realm, they're just going to look at you blankly. Alright, let's climb out of the basement. We're now moving into the functional range now, Intelligence 5 to 9. This is where we get a lot of the humanoid types living in the game. Intelligence 5 is the internalized purpose tier. Let's revisit our ogre friend. He's big, strong, follows orders. The difference from Intelligence 4 to 5 is supervision. At 5, a creature can hold a job or a duty in their mind without you standing right next to them. Their working memory handles chains of maybe 3 to 4 tasks. Go to the gate, watch for the elf, ring the bell if you see him. And he can do that, but he's never going to be asking why. He's not standing there pondering eventualities or the right or wrong of the situation that may unfold. They can select actions to achieve a goal, but they can't question the goal itself. If the elf shows up and offers them a better job, they might be incredibly confused. They rely on authorities to set the parameters of their reality. So when do we actually get a society? Creatures that can build a village and have a culture? That happens at Intelligence 6. This is the threshold for true society. Concepts like hierarchy, ownership, and tradition become functional realities. Creatures like trolls or ettins fall here. In the Forgotten Realms, there have been civilizations like this, and there still are. They can plan short sequences and basic contingencies. If plan A fails, they might actually have a plan B, a very simple one. If sword doesn't work, use fire. A lot can be done with just that simple shift in capacity. By Intelligence 7, we see self-directed learning. They originate their own objectives and most certainly can use deception, provided they have sufficient senses. But just learning the routines of other creatures can be very effective. They still have strong limitations though. They get confused when they don't have a routine, and they tend to fall back to triggered routines or survival instincts. more often than not when that happens. In an animal, we would call this base instincts, but in social animals, we call these states emotions. The beginnings of emotional control arrives at intelligence 8, defined as situationally adaptive intent. That means they can subordinate their biology to reason. Although they might be starving hungry, they can put aside eating the moment they get some food if it leads to, or they know that a better opportunity is coming later. For example, catching a fish and then using that fish as bait to catch a larger fish. It's the beginnings of patience and delayed gratification. Before we get into the numbers that are assumed to be the human average, let's talk about language for a moment. If something that used to be integral to the intelligence attribute but has been detached since 4th edition, still, we gain a lot of insight about just what the human average means and what having an intelligence below that should be like when role-playing. Because below intelligence 9, you can hear it. First off, below that number, and the person is not going to be fully fluent. For reading and writing, at least in basic D&D and 1st and 2nd edition advanced D&D, they would not be literate. They don't know how to read or write unless they have been trained to do so by a professional or by their character class, which seems extreme unless you look at the current world statistics for literacy, which I have done while researching this topic, and it's shocking. See, most charts stop at yes or no, and don't consider the degree of literacy, but the fact is, full literacy is certainly not a sure thing for the average human even today on Earth. Language requires a certain degree of abstract thinking ability. Below intelligence 7, it's a struggle to even articulate thoughts into speech. For creatures not of the goodly races, below intelligence 8 means they do not read and write, and are unlikely to be able to say more than the most basic things in any language other than their own. Sorry to everyone who abuses the hell out of the talk with animals spell, but there is no way that you'll be having much of a conversation with a cow or a frog or whatever. So at intelligence 9, you're a capable person. You can plan independently. You can weigh risks against benefits. You can communicate abstract ideas. It's funny, we usually think of the average as boring, but hearing what we came from, fighting against pure instinct, struggling just for dinner, being average is actually a massive evolutionary achievement. Still, intelligence 9, while functional in society in most situations, still has a lot of limitations, not obvious until tested. For one thing, they're lousy at puzzles. A casual game of Sudoku is a serious challenge they will likely avoid. They may take a long time to learn basic math, and they still have to write down everything to work it out. They don't read novels for entertainment, and it will simply perplex them as to how people more intelligent than they are could do the things they do. A person with an intelligence of 9 can be completely confident even when they are wrong, because it's most likely they're reliant on some perceived source they trust and have never bothered to seek possibly conflicting information anywhere else. Sure, they can function independently, they can grasp the abstract, but they're far from being a genius yet. The fact is, they really understand just how far they are from being a genius. Now we cross over from average to exceptional. I'm going to avoid a hell of a lot of jargon, babble, and slip into some more comfortable metaphor. And for this, I'm going to use computers, because it works pretty well. Those familiar with brain anatomy, I'm about to compare the triune layers to a computation system, and it's going to get wild. For those of you who stuck with me up to this point, here's the payoff of me promising to blow your mind. Also, apologies to computer experts and brain anatomy experts. I am neither of those things, and this is just a metaphor framework. I'm not going to educate anyone on computer engineering here. It's just a metaphor. So please cut me some slack. Think of the way a computer works. You have your base machine code. This is what you see when you switch it on, and no software is installed yet. It's the assembly code. When everything else crashes and you get the blue screen of death or whatever, that's very roughly the same as the reptile brain. In human anatomy, that is the core of the brain, the basal ganglia, the brain stem, and sometimes the cerebellum, the lump at the back, which handles stuff you don't need to pay attention to. This is your trigger response engine. It's good old intelligence 1 to 3. Still there, the sturdy card holding up the rest of the delicately balanced stack. When all else fails, it takes over. But it's always working away in the background, exerting a powerful and pervasive influence. Your primal instincts and strongest emotions. When it takes over, it has override authority to keep you alive, basically. We all know about fight, flight, or freeze. That's the culprit right there. Brains evolved. They got bigger. They got another layer. We call it the limbic or emotional brain. Some call it the social brain. It showed up with early mammals. The limbic system is your amygdala, hippocampus, hypothalamus, the cingulate gyrus, and so on. It governs your emotions, motivation, memory formation, essentially what gets shunted into the cerebellum or not. Your social bonding and a lot of the fear or pleasure responses, your feelings. In a computer system, this is your operating system. This is Windows or Linux or whatever graphic user interface software you prefer. It comes stock standard with everyone having the same core programs included. Hello society, language, social conformity, and so on. We all know what anger or sadness or joy looks like. We all have that stuff included in our basic operating system. The funky thing is, those base emotional programs, they're always active. But normally they don't show up on the screen unless they're triggered. There is some strong controls in place to make sure they don't have all of them playing merry havoc with your consciousness at any one time. And this is critically important to remember, as we will see this as we rise up the intelligence scale later on. Next layer is the neocortex. We call this the rational brain. We humans like to think this is our turf entirely, but a few other animals play around in this zone. It's not just to the extent that we do. The cerebral cortex handles reasoning, language, planning, abstract thought, impulse control, and culture. It's not automatic. We upload these things gradually. In computers, this is the apps and custom software we load into our computer. It's also your bookmarked websites, your socials, your news feeds, and so on. Now that we have this metaphor established, and let me just say that took the majority of the work creating this video, believe me. For the brain experts, yes, I'm well aware of the modern comparative neuroanatomy and the work of George Strait, Terence Deacon, and others with emphasis on reorganization, expansion, and integration, as you are about to see. To quote Mad Max Fury Road, witness me. Let's continue up the scale of the intelligence attribute, and where I leave the sourcebooks in the dust for the most part. But they are handy for the game mechanics involving casting spells. I'm also going to quote Gary Gygax himself in what I'm sure is going to be a hotly debated issue in the comments. I look forward to reading everyone's views on it. Okay, so most players don't want to be average. No one wants to be average in a fantasy game. They want to play the wizard with an intelligence of 18. So what actually changes when we cross into genius territory, intelligence 10 to 18. This is where it gets really interesting for roleplay, because you can't just play smarter. You have to think differently. Intelligence 10 and 11 are fairly obvious. They're your independent business owners, your traveling merchants, your blacksmiths. They may even be able to cast a first level spell with sufficient years of training. And certainly can figure out things like crossword puzzles, at least how they work, but they're probably not finishing a lot of them and will gravitate towards word finder puzzles or mazes. And here's the important thing. While they can be good at something, they won't be good at a lot of things. Most other things, in fact. But while the loudmouth with an intelligence 9 is expounding their brilliance at the tavern because they heard something convincing that confirms their own bias, the intelligence 11 person will be asking someone they know that is smarter than they are, if what the other person is talking about is true. They're aware of their limitations and make the best of what they can do. While they are pretty good at remembering 4 or 5 numbers and can recite them forwards or backwards, even if distracted, they know very well that they probably won't remember those numbers for very long and will struggle to get more than 6 numbers right without writing them down. After all, this is Dungeons & Dragons. People don't have to remember 20 passwords, and to be honest, outside of your own phone number, how many others do you actually know without using your contacts list? Another hallmark of the above average intelligence score is their desire to learn more. They continue to educate themselves past any formal schooling. but tend to stick to things that specifically interest them, such as learning all about a game which is important to their social group. Let's look at intelligence 12 to 14, the strategist and advisor tier. At intelligence 12, they have strategic foresight. They aren't just reacting to the battle, they're anticipating complications before they happen. If we attack the goblins here, the noise will attract the guard in the next room. They see the dominoes. Predicting what comes next is now routine, not a mental effort, but it's not yet automatic. This level of intelligence may not be the leader, but they will certainly be an influence on any leader wise enough to listen to them. Note what I just said about mental effort. This is a good way to understand the progression as well. At first, a particular mental trait will be out of reach. Then it will be something that can be comprehended but seem impossibly hard to do. And then something mentally taxing to accomplish, then fairly routine, and then it becomes automatic and effortless. Language ability is a good example of this, as is doing math in your head, remembering song lyrics or the birthdays of all your friends and family members, and so on. At intelligence 13, we cross into tactical empathy, the ability to simulate the emotions and reactions of others, to manipulate the outcome. This sounds a bit sinister, but empathy can be highly beneficial to a healer or a politician. And remember, it's not the ability to sense the emotions and reactions, it's the ability to predict them. Big difference. A high intelligence character doesn't just use logic, they understand people. They know the Duke is insecure, so they frame the argument to boost his ego, because that's what they've learned how to do, and because they remember all the things that they did or didn't work in similar situations in the past. Intelligence 13 people work out how to do things more efficiently. They start to show signs of invention and innovation, but they have to work at it and probably plan things out on paper. Intelligence 14 is the optimizer. They don't just do the task, they refine the process with much less effort. They are the high-level advisor who walks into a room, sees how you're running your kingdom, and fixes your economy in 5 minutes because they see the inefficiencies immediately. Efficiency becomes second nature to them. Intelligence 15 is where most humans max out. It's rare to be higher than this, and folks with an intelligence of 15 will be obviously clever. They'll be known as the smartest person their friends know, when you would want them on your team for those quiz nights at the local tavern. We take another leap at intelligence 16. This is an exceptionally gifted individual who turns up the resolution on their memory. It's no longer just static, disjointed photographs, depending on how visually enabled their memories are. The ability to see things with the mind eye is not the same for everyone. It's on a spectrum as well, and this person has put on their 3D vision sunglasses. They've gone from VCR to DVD. They have an index. They can navigate, and that navigation works with enough using the context that they search with effort, but they can stop and ponder every instance that they can recall of ever having eaten an apple, different kinds of apple recipes, fruit similar to apples, and so on. Their brain is expanding on their existing ability and reorganizing things more efficiently. They are aware of their limitations, however, and will know it could be better, much better. In advanced D&D, this is where the wizard added a 10% experience point bonus. They leveled up faster, which in role-playing world settings would absolutely carry a significant recognized status. Under this level, their wizarding career is fairly limited. Above this level, they could end up in a position of prestige if they play their cards right. They would be accepted by more capable wizards as a peer, which, far from decreasing the pressure and competition among them, actually amps it up to 11. They are academics, after all, and there are only so many tenured positions available at the Wizard Academy, if you see what I mean. Someone with an intelligence of 16 or 17 can comfortably administrate an entire city. Their mind is well organized, they are sharp, and they are focused, noticeably so. It's unlikely that these individuals would not have some sort of reputation for being formidably smart. The resolution goes to Blu-ray DVD at intelligence 17, and with some effort, it's interactive. They don't just remember where everything was in a room they worked in 6 months ago, they can walk around in that room. However, they are limited to whatever they noticed at the time. They obviously don't recall anything that they didn't look at and know was there. They can't quite just say zoom in and enhance over and over and invent pixels like magic. Well, they can, but they won't be accurate. And they'll know that they're not accurate, which is another wickedly powerful mental tool. They fact-check their own thoughts, and with some effort, they can critique their own biases in real time. They can simultaneously hold two opposing points of view and suspend their need to narrow it down to one or the other while they gather more evidence, one way or the other. Intelligence 18 is the history-bending archmage, the mortal apex. An Intelligence 18 mind is like a film director editing the movie while they're filming it. They can think about their own thinking fluidly, watching themselves think, correcting errors in logic, spotting fallacies before the thought is even finished. That's pure power. In AD&D 2nd edition, Intelligence 18 was required just to cast 9th level spells, the reality-altering magic. The implication is that you physically couldn't hold the complex magical formula in your mind without this level of processing power. Your brain would just overflow. So that's the peak of humanity. Past this is superhuman intelligence. This is where reorganization, expansion, and integration really starts to kick in hard. And what were once very necessary barriers and divisions in the mind that are vital for focus and cohesion are repurposed and weaponized to achieve astonishing new levels of cognitive power. This is a very rough conversion trick. You can just multiply the intelligence by 10 to give the equivalent intelligence quotient or IQ score, which works pretty well but breaks down past, say, intelligence 15 because we don't have any but a handful of historic figures as possible examples, like Leonardo da Vinci, clearly an extraordinary genius, but he never sat down and took an IQ test. Contemporary genius individuals actually fly under the radar quite commonly. Two names you all know, and it may shock you to learn have very high IQ scores, are Rowan Atkinson and James Woods. Both achieved early dominance in academic training, are highly complex personalities that hold strong stances on issues they find to be important, have a diverse range of interests and a number of hobbies, are masters of multiple fields, and have a lightning-fast wit that can leave you in stitches, either of laughter or painfully piecing back together your shattered ego. These are individuals who choose what area of interest that they will become a leading intellectual force of. They choose it. They are masters of their own fate. When dealing with a being at this level of intellect, if you come into conflict with them, it's because they engineered it that way. You have already lost before the fight even begins because they have chosen not to avoid it entirely. They have decided to indulge in a bit of violence because they see you as an inconvenience and annoyance to be removed or fixed. This is a good point to bring in Gary Gygax and quote directly from the very first edition of the game, and his method of dealing with the disparity between decisions and actions of the player, or the Dungeon Master, and the player character or non-player character who is either very smart or very stupid. So, quoting directly from page 10 of the Men and Magic book in the original white box edition of Dungeons & Dragons, Gary writes this description. Intelligence is a prime requisite for magic types. Both fighters and clerics can use it as their prime requisite areas, strength and wisdom respectively, or on a 2-for-1 basis. Intelligence will also affect referees' decisions as to whether or not certain action would be taken. It allows additional languages to be spoken. End quote. Did you catch that? Intelligence will also affect referees' decisions as to whether or not certain action would be taken. Yes, you heard that correctly. If the Dungeon Master decides that a player character is too stupid or too smart to do what the player just said that they are going to do, they were instructed to take into account the character's intelligence score, and if it was too low to do the smart thing or too high to do the stupid thing the player was wanting to have their character do, they were encouraged to say no. This is not about player agency. It was about playing the role of the character correctly. Simply put, if the player ignores the fact their character is stupid, they are cheating. And if the Dungeon Master ignores the high intelligence of the character and says nothing as the player does something stupid, the Dungeon Master is cheating. This was as fundamental as using information the player character or non-player character would not possibly know. We call that metagaming. This principle is extremely important when it comes to role-playing beings who are more intelligent than you are, because they reverse the situation. They know things the player could not possibly know. The Dungeon Master doesn't suffer this problem as much because they have full access to all the information about the game world, and they can just ask the player any question about the player character, read the character sheet if need be, just make stuff up and add it into the game at any time and in any way required for the narrative situation. As a player, when facing a being that is extremely intelligent, it is acceptable for the Dungeon Master to retcon. What does retcon mean? Retcon, short for retroactive continuity, is a storytelling technique where previous established facts, events, or details in a narrative are altered, ignored, supplemented, or contradicted to fit new developments, resolve inconsistencies, or enhance the plot. Americans would call this do-over. It is acceptable for a Dungeon Master to retcon an action made by an extremely intelligent being in the game that would result in them appearing stupid, and it is acceptable for them to pause the game and allow a player of an extremely intelligent character to retcon their actions if the result has made their character appear stupid. As long as this is applied fairly and equally to both player characters and non-player characters, monsters and such, there is no problem doing this in a role-playing game. It's one of the major advantages in being in a full, fluid control of a cooperatively created narrative fantasy. We decide what happens. Not a video game programmer, not a scriptwriter. We do. Gary didn't seem to consider retcon to be a dirty word, so neither should we. Okay, let's finally cross into superintelligence. Intelligence 19 to 24. This is the alien shift. Beyond intelligence 18, the mind operates in new ways that the human brain currently doesn't. There is a specific rule from the Rules Encyclopedia that completely blew my mind. It's about illusions. In old school D&D, an intelligence of 19 provides complete immunity to first level illusions. Intelligence 20 gives immunity to second level illusions. You don't even roll the dice. If your character or the creature sees the illusion effect, they know it's fake instantly. Their mind is so sharp, so hyper-analytical, that it spots the inconsistencies in reality immediately. It's like spotting AI content these days. The shadow is 2 degrees off. Stop. Slop. The sound doesn't match the Doppler effect. Fake news. The flaw is as obvious to them as a 7-fingered hand is to us. It seems very much like this is stepping into the turf of wisdom and perception, right? But what it represents is processing speed. It's weaponized skepticism and real-time, rapid-fire sensory analysis. Still, I guess it was confusing enough that it was dropped out of the game mechanics in later edition, but it's still pretty wild to think about. At Intelligence 20, a major change occurs. For the very top of human capability, and with great effort, the mind can not only completely control all its basic instincts, it can put them to work as additional computing power. This first manifests as accessing sensory data that is normally filtered out. So when you look around a room, your eyes use a narrow area of focus with a lot of blurry peripheral vision around the edge. Your eyes don't smoothly scan the area, they twitch from point to point. Your brain fills in the blanks for the rest to make it seem a lot smoother and more comprehensive than it actually is. It's a neat trick to be sure, but when you can suddenly access all of that information, you really step into memories or locations and pick up on details you didn't even look at when you were there. Alongside this, you have a high working memory capacity. Your RAM is now so high in your computer you can parallel process, or begin to. You can't think more than one thing at a time, but you can do it so quickly you can juggle multiple trains of thought at the same time. This is fairly well represented by how many spells a wizard can memorize and have ready to go during the day. The act of memorization is not just reading some text, it's like reading the lyrics and musical notes of a song and playing all that but the chorus in your head all day until the moment you cast the spell and finally sing that chorus, and then boom, it goes off and you can now relax from the effort of having your head crammed with wizard radio all day. On top of the strain of still having to have conversations with people and pay attention to what is going on around you. Now you know why very high intelligence score is a must-have for arcane spellcasting, and just how mentally grueling it must be. Try playing multiple songs in your head at the same time and see how many you can keep together. Test your mental might. Then have a conversation with someone while you're doing it. It would probably take years of constant training and practice, right? Now, the idea of the absent-minded wizard who fails to notice things around him takes on a different light, and I like to imagine the wizard who has run out of spell slots taking a moment to quietly take a few willow bark powder pills and a swig of water, then running back over the events of the adventure so far and turning to the other characters. "You blithering idiots, what the hell were you thinking? Was I supposed to babysit you lot and carry an arsenal of deadly incantations in my head at the same time?" Meanwhile, the other characters are sharing a, "Oh, here we go," look amongst themselves while wondering what the hell an arsenal or incantation means. Okay, remember when I said reorganization and optimization would become important later? This is where it comes into play. Intelligence 21, the mind that takes control of its own partitions and puts them to work. The best way to describe this is a highly functional multiple personalities. Their emotions become agents, and their primary conscious working memory environment starts to delegate tasks to these sub-minds. This requires a lot of effort at Intelligence 21, and it's a bit unreliable, but they really can hold more than one thought train going on in their head at the same time. A huge leap in cognitive power. This is where we start to add extra central processing chips in parallel to their computer. At first, they have to share the same base assembly language in the same operating system, but as we go up the scale, this becomes easier and then automatic, and these sub-minds, those parallel processors, become more and more complex, independent, and powerful. You could be listening to this conversation while another part of your brain solves a complex math problem and another rewrites a screenplay. But it's deeper than multitasking. These minds are sourced from emotions that are very likely to influence the behavior of each submind. On the other hand, while this is a new problem, another problem is now well under control, because an entity like this can feel white-hot rage, acknowledge it, shove it into a submind to process, and continue the conversation with cold, perfect logic. Incredibly useful, a little sociopathic, but efficient. Intelligence 22 and 23 ramp this up, with those steps of it becoming less taxing for 22 and easy but not yet automatic for 23. But they can now both run the same apps on more processors. Those subminds are now starting to run through memories and project scenarios, modeling multiple outcomes and comparing different strategies very quickly, feeding the outcomes back to the shared working memory. The mind's eye is now looking ahead in many directions at the same time, and it's a wicked advantage. Another way to look at it, for those who love pinball machines, games like as much as I do, when they trigger a multi-ball, they can track each ball as though it's the only ball in play for each of them, rather than a normal human intelligence which would simply flip the paddles anytime a ball comes near and largely hope for the best. There are still some limitations. These subminds are not advanced enough yet to handle full-on conversations. They don't have a handle on literacy either. They're just climbing the intelligence ladder and are just entering the sapient threshold. Which brings us to Intelligence 24, the point they do cross that threshold, and they start to think and plot with some degree of autonomy, but all working together in a singular scope. Beings with an intelligence of 24 and 25 don't guess what will happen. They run a simulation in their head that is nearly perfect. They can visualize cause and effect across timelines without degradation. If you're planning a surprise attack on one of these beings, it has likely already simulated the attack, simulated your failure, and simulated the next 10 years of its life after it kills you. At Intelligence 26, we have the next cognitive leap, where the subminds start to spawn their own subminds, increasing their ability to model simulations of the future and access any information from the memory are exponential now. Intelligence 27 and 28 just represent the amount of effort it takes to fully engage those abilities. When they hit Intelligence 29, it's easy and fully automatic. They don't sweat over it, they just do it. Intelligence 30 is the last threshold, where the mind makes subminds, which make subminds, which make subminds. And you can model things internally so well, you can simulate complete realities in your head. This is the ultimate God mode ability and lines up perfectly with what powers gods already have. This connects directly to how gods behave in the game when combined with their massive wisdom scores and innate planner powers. Gods, typically intelligence 25 or higher, do not do stupid things. If a deity can't win a fight, it will teleport away immediately. A god doesn't let you roll for initiative unless it already knows it's going to win. So if you've actually got into a fair fight with a god, you've already lost. You just don't know it yet. Much like you didn't know that getting into a fight with a god is an amazingly stupid thing for a mortal being to do. The god isn't just playing games, it's reading the code. It's writing the code while playing the game. It is the Dungeon Master. Okay, before I roll up my character sheet and file myself back into the shells of Candlekeep, one more little nugget regarding intelligence is the Awaken Spell. Awaken Intelligence is a truly ancient spell in the Forgotten Realms campaign setting. In the Lords of Darkness sourcebook, it says the ancient Saurian creator Saruk, a mummy named Histak, carried a nether scroll with the spell on it, and that knowledge was collected from around the world at the time of the Empire 30,000 years in the past, so its origin most likely was from the Aboleth, ancient even at that time, who altered other life forms as they saw fit and are potently psychic. The process involves a dried fish, a piece of brain coral, which Aboleth would certainly have no problem getting hold of, with chanting and bodily motions not necessarily involving the hands. It's difficult and requires arcane laboratory equipment. It's so mentally draining, the caster needs a day of rest before they can cast spells again, and so painful for the target it can kill them. But it's permanent, and if combined with the Alter Beast spell, the Sapience enhancement breeds true in the target's offspring. So it can create a whole subspecies of sapient versions of creatures that otherwise would have an instinct-driven animal intelligence. Think about the implications. It can permanently elevate an animal's mind, creating a new sentient species. You take a wolf from intelligence 3, routine dominant, and drag it up to higher intelligence. You're effectively cursing it with sentience. You're turning a happy predator into a creature who can suddenly worry about its own mortality. That's a heavy burden to bear. I have a lot more notes on different types of non-human intelligence coming soon as I follow up on this video. It will cover some real dynamite tools you can apply directly to your games, including the influence of each outer plane on the intelligence behavior of every creature native to those alien dimensions. I'm going to add all that, I was, into this video, but I've decided to be merciful and give you time to rest and ponder all the details covered so far. So, we've climbed the ladder from the simple ooze to the great old one that may be dreaming your very existence. It's a hell of a ride, and I'm very happy to have brought you along with me. My name is AJ Pickett, the Sage of Candlekeep, your guide to the impossible. As always, thank you very much for listening, and I'll be back with more for you very soon.